So let's look at creating something then. So what I'm going to do is create kind of like a basic kitchen tile sort of effect. So what I will do is I'm going to create a new substance. Let's call this kitchen tiles. I'm going to save the same values as before. It's a PBR metallic roughness. Absolute 2048 by 2048 relative to parent, and let's click OK. So this is going to give us the same starting point that we had before. Just this kind of chain here. Okay. So let's start out with a pattern. So generally when you start out with a substance, I would start out with the height information first of all and get that working right, and then start adding to that bit by bit, including the color and the normal map and everything else. So we're going to deal with this down here first of all. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to press space. I'm going to start typing in tile. And down here we have a couple of different things. I'm going to use this tile generator. This is a grayscale one, so I'm not adding any color information at all right now. So let's click on that. So that gives us this kind of tile pattern. Okay. So straight away I'm going to plug this into the height map and the ambient occlusion. So let's get rid of this. Let's plug this in here. Let's make sure we've got our height information on. So materials, default, edit, like we had to do before. And in the height value, we're going into here and we're adding the scale on there. Okay, and notice it's not doing anything right now. So we need to go in and add the ambient occlusion as well. So let's go in here. Let's add the ambient occlusion. So this HBAO map. Let's plug this in. And let's also drag this into here. And then you see you start getting the effect of that those tiles. Okay. So let's have a look at this tile generator. And this is a really, really useful node. If I double click on this and go into it, we've got lots of different parameters in here. So you'll be able to see these update on this 2D map. So I've got the tile amount, so I've got a Y amount which is across, and I've got the the X amount which is across, the Y amount which is vertically. So we can change this values. So say we wanted it 6 by 6, and do that. If I want it 12 by 12, do that. So the power of being able to change that on the fly is really, really useful. I'm going to change this, say, to, let's do 8 by 8 as a starting pattern. The pattern itself we can change, so I can have different kind of patterns. So again, I'll just zoom in so we can see this. So we can see the effect here. I'm going to drag this over a little bit so we can make that a little bit bigger. So we've got brick, can do square, which is an entire square on that. We can do disc, we can create that kind of pattern. We can do paraboloid. You see that's kind of created sort of a sphere-ish look to that. We have bell, which is this smaller kind of shape, etc, etc. So Gaussian, thorn, go through. We've got the different values. Okay. We can also use this image input as well. So a lot of the time I will use this. I'm going to use it in this particular instance here. So basically on the input to this, I've got a pattern input and a background. So we can plug something into the pattern input and it's going to use it for all of these tiles, for all of this variation. And again, you can create really powerful looks to something doing this. I'm going to do something really simple. So what I'm going to do is press space. We're going to use a shape node. And again, the shape mode kind of gives us some basic shapes in there as well. And you see they're pretty much similar to what we started out with. So I'm going to do a square. What I want to do with this actually is on these tiles, I want them to have a bit of a rounded edge. So right now these are quite square on the edges. I want them to have a bit of roundness to them. So what I can do is go into this, our shape. I'm going to scale this down a little bit, so it's got a bit of a border. And then I'm going to plug this into the input of this. If I double click on this now, and let's change this to image input, we're now using this particular shape. and you'll see. So another useful thing about this, by the way, this is another kind of thing to get used to in Substance Designer. What I want to do sometimes is see the result here on this particular node, but play around with the values on this. So if I double click on that node, I'm showing the properties of this here. Then if I single click on that node, then I'm showing the properties here, but I'm showing the result here, sorry, and I'm showing the properties here. So I can now change the scale value, and we can play around with that as we want to play around with it. So we can change the values on the fly. So what I'm going to do here is I want to round off these corners, and I'm going to do that with a blur node. So let's click this, let's press space, and let's start typing blur. So again, zoom out of this. I'm going to bring the intensity down to something like that. So we've got a little bit of a blurred edge to this. And again, if I double click here, you see that blur there. Again, I can do the same. I can make sure I've double clicked on that one, single click on that, and let's take that a bit more extreme. You can see that result. So I just want to blur those edges off a little bit to soften everything out. I want to tighten these edges up a little bit, so I want to make them more rounded rather than just blurred. So I'm going to click on this again, I'm going to press space, and we're going to use a levels node. So what the levels allows us to do is either change the shadows, the highlights, or the mid values. And in this instance, I want to create more of a contrast. So the way we do this is I bring up the black values, so I'm making the blacks stronger, and bring down the white values to make the white stronger. And what I'm going to get out of that, let's just play around with these two. I'm going to get a corner on there, around a corner. I'm going to bring the blur up a little more. I'll play around with the blur value. So I'm going between these two. Till I get something like that. It's giving me a bit of a corner on that. Okay, so it just rounds off the whole thing. So you can see we've added a couple of nodes together now to create this one kind of tile. Okay. So a useful thing we can do with this, if I want to kind of use this again but know where we're going with it, I can grab that and we can add a frame to this. So I can go in there, I can say this is the single tile. We can give this a color if we want to as well. And now I can move this around as an entire unit. So we can do something like that. So that's got a single tile in there. That's got that through the tile generator, which is creating our multiple versions of this. So let's go back to the tile generator. So we can do a couple of other things in there. We've done the X and Y amount. We've done the input. We can go down. So we can change the rotation. One of the things we can do is actually make a rotation random as well. So we can change this value here. We can do, let's make sure I'm double clicking on this. We've got some randomness values down here, and actually, so the rotation itself, you can't really see because this is square, by the way, as this is rotating. If I went up to there and just went into that rotation again, you can see it's just kind of not really showing any difference because they are perfectly square. But as I go down, you'll see this kind of changing as we go through. So we've got the middle size, so I've got horizontal and we've got vertical. So you can see I can actually change the spacing of these tiles. So let's just set this back to 0.5. We've got the vertical. So we can create different kind of looks just by doing that. Okay. We've got the interstices, which is the middle gaps. So again, we can change those values. So we can do the X, make those thicker. Do that on the Y and make those thicker. And then we also have these random values. So we can add randomness to all of this as well. You can see straight away we're creating a completely different look to that. Again, for now, I'll just take these down. I'm actually controlling the interstices through my tile right now and through this scaling of this square here. That's what I'm controlling, these middle areas, this grout area essentially. Let's go back into this. Let's just zoom down. So we have a scale value, so we can scale that up, which is essentially like scaling that square up. But again, one of the things we've got the ability to do here is scale random. So this would be really useful if you had different sized bricks on a brick wall, for example, or paving stones. We can add some, we can get rid of the uniformity of it. Again, really handy to be able to do this kind of thing. So I'm going to do that a little bit. Not much, just quite subtle. Just add a bit of variation to that. I'm going to go down. We have an offset. So we could make that into a brick wall. We could kind of offset these. Again, we can do that, and we can add a bit of randomness to that. So again, if you're creating like an old stone wall or something, that could be useful. I'll just switch that off for now. The vertical, we'll just do a vertical offset rather than a horizontal offset. You just click that on, and it's the same thing. Then we have position random. So again, we can change the position of these things. Play around with those. We have a global offset, which is just going to move the entire thing across. So on the X and on the Y. And then I was talking about rotation. This is where we can add randomness to the rotation. So I can go in here and we can start adding some random factors into this. So again, one of the things that you see often in Substance Design is it's just like really subtle versions of this. So tiles may not have been placed perfectly, or if they've aged over time and some have dropped a little bit, can add some values to this. So I'm going to go in and let's type a smaller value in, maybe 0.01, which is going to add a little bit of randomness into this, a little bit of variation to the rotations on that. If you just take that down. So it's really, really subtle. Okay, let's just try that too, maybe. Let's just try it to 3. So you can see that a bit stronger now in terms of those values. So some of the tiles have just not been placed incorrectly, and it gives it more of a human kind of touch. So the other thing we've got down here is the color, and we've got a luminance value. So this can be done a different way, but we're looking at the real basics here. So with this luminance random, you can kind of change the color of this. So essentially the way this is working on a height map is that pure white will be pushed out more. Darker greys will look like they're pushed in a bit more. So if we've got these tiles that aren't completely even, aren't completely in the same line, we can add some randomness to that. So this will look like these tiles are pushed further in. You can see that down there. You can see these tiles here, which are these two, are pushing out further than this one here and these ones here. So again, we can add that kind of a random factor to that really nicely. So have something like that. Okay. So just from those couple of nodes and from this tile generator, we've already created something that we can completely customize and completely change very, very quickly. So let's add some other things to this then. One of the things I want to add is I want to add some noise onto these tiles. So we don't want them perfectly smooth like this. And what I'm going to do this with is I'm going to do it with the normal map. So what we call low frequency noise, which is kind of the silhouette of our thing. So these are the tiles sticking out. I like to do through a height map. High frequency noise, which are the smaller details, is best to do through a normal map. Okay, so let's do with our normal map. I'm going to go in. I'm going to create. I'm going to use one of these. I'm going to use something like a black and white spot. Let's drag this in. So this is going to give us some really nice high frequency noise. Again, we can change the properties of this. I can change the scale value on this. Bring it up, bring it down. I can change the disorder of this. So I can do different things with it. Take the scale value a bit. And I'm going to plug this into the normal map. And that's going to create this normal map version of this. You see that's on there already? That's just giving us that bit of noise on there. This is a bit too strong, So actually on this intensity here, I can just bring that down. I can make it a bit more subtle. So we get that kind of effect. Okay. So it's just changing the way that the light passes across. Now what I don't want to do on this is sometimes, in fact we'll leave that this time, I'll do that with the colour information where we can start masking out. So when we look at the colour, I'll start adding a different colour to the mortar than I do to the tiles themselves. So we'll leave that for a second. So what I will do though is start looking now at, say, the roughness. So right now, if I look at this, I could set the roughness to be maybe a bit shinier. So let's bring this down. And let's have these tiles so they're a bit shinier now. Bring this up a little bit. But what I wouldn't want to have is the mortar to be shiny as well. I want that not as reflective. So this is where we can start adding mask to this. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to pull this down a little bit. I'm going to grab this. I'm going to give myself some space. This is my uniform color, my roughness. Let's just pull that down. So I'm going to add 2 values into this. So this is going to be my tiles. And then I'm going to add another uniform color. So let's press space. Let's type in UN. This one is going to be, let's have it grayscale, and let's have this white. So this is completely matte. And to merge these two together, let's add a blend node. So let's bring this into our background, and let's bring this into our foreground. So our matte area, and let's plug this into here. Our matte area at the minute is in the background. Our shiny area is in the foreground. Okay. So what we have on this is we have this opacity. So here we can use a mask to define which areas are this texture and which areas are this texture. So again, having dealt with Substance Painter, you know about masks, or hopefully you know about masks. So we're going to create one on the fly here. And it's going to be from our tile texture here. So the first thing I want to do with this is I want to make it pure black and white. I don't want any of this. So this luminance value I used earlier, I kind of want to get rid of that. So the way I'm going to do that is I'm going to go in, I'm going to press space, and I'm going to use this levels node again. So let's just plug this in here. And let's go into here. And again, what I can do is just add some contrast to this. So I can bring the whites down, bring the blacks up. And there we just have black and white values there. We've got rid of all the grayscale values. So what I can do, I'm just going to bring this up. So I'm going to grab that and I'm going to plug this into this bottom value here. And that's done the job for us. It's a bit difficult to see on this, so the way this is pushing in. But now these areas are completely shiny and these areas are completely matte. And just to prove this, I'm going to click into this, and what I'll do is I'll invert this. So we've got a button here to invert. So now I've got this mask the other way around. So now notice that those areas of the tiles now are now not shiny. They're not reflective anymore. Okay, the inside would be. It's a bit difficult to see because of the ambient occlusion in there as well. I'll tone that down a little bit. But let me just go in and let's just invert that back again. So our shiny areas are where they should be. So that's a way we can control the way that these things layer together. Okay. Again, let's just move this down a little bit. I'm going to bring this up. But similarly, as I said before, if I want to change any of this, I can still go in here and we can still change these values here. So let's say we want just 4x4 tiles. Okay. Completely changed the look of it, but it's not changed down the chain. This is still plugging in, it's still creating the mask. This is still creating all the height information. Everything's in there for us. So really, really powerful. So let's do the same with the color information. Let's say we want a different color on the tiles and the grout. So let's go up to here. Similar kind of thing. I'm going to have like the tile color. And then I can Control-C and Control-V this as well. Copy and paste that as well. So let's say that's color. I'm going to have the color of the mortar to be like a white color. I'm going to have the color of the tiles to be, let's say, like a kind of powder blue color. Just drag these out. Same kind of thing. I'm going to put a blend node in this. So let's plug this into the background, plug our color into the foreground, and plug this into here. So no change at the moment because this is on top. And now what I can do is actually, I don't need to create this mask again. I can use exactly the same mask. So I can drag this out of here and I can plug this into here. So you can kind of see that. Let's deal with ambient occlusion actually, because you can't fully see that. So I'm going to go down to this HB Aome node. And what I'm going to do is, let's just zoom in on this. I'm going to change this height depth down. So I'm not going to have this as strong. Let's maybe do this 0.03. So it's going to have a little bit of ambient occlusion on there, just to create the idea of shadows where the light isn't hitting fully. Let's just bring the radius down a little bit as well. I'm going to take the samples up of this as well, up to 16 samples. So again, let's just play with this. So actually that's better there. You see I'm just getting this little kind of shading around that. That's my ambient occlusion. Okay. So again, we've got all of this working as one kind of section. Everything's sort of dependent down the chain. So if I didn't like this square, maybe I wanted the gap to be a bit smaller or a bit bigger, I can still come down here and we can change any of these factors here. So let's go down to this and let's change the scale. And now I've got that kind of tile pattern instead. If I want a bit of a bigger shape, then I can go in. I can put that up. So if I want them quite close together, I can just make that even smaller. So you can imagine how, if you're doing that in with a photograph, that would be really tricky. If I was doing that in something like Photoshop, I'd have to change a lot of parameters to be able to change that look as easily as I can within Substance Designer. So that's like a very, very basic look at Substance Designer in terms of creating a very basic pattern. But hopefully that's given you a flavour of what you can do in Substance Designer and something to be able to explore further.